When Alona makes friends with her seductive classmate, she gradually realizes that her newfound companion is manipulating her to become part of her wealthy family. Sylvie Cooper goes to a local hangout, where she sees a carefree blonde lady. When this woman enjoys swinging on a swing, Sylvia can't help but admire her in secret. Suddenly, the children report that the dog was hit by a car, and this forces everyone gathered on the spot to come and look. They believe that the poor thing is still alive, but they know that someone has to put an end to her suffering. Just at this moment, a mysterious lady appears and hits the dog with a metal rod, eventually killing her. A few days later, Sylvie is taken into custody by a planted message about a bomb threat on TV, which she did, because she hated the reporter for saying something bad about teenagers like her. Coincidentally, the blonde lady also gets punished for having poor grades in biology, which she needs to improve because she is a scientist. Then she asks about the old man who picks up Sylvia from school, and he replies that he is her father. Then this woman realizes that her father and the reporter are the same people, and she thinks that Sylvia is so cool for calling her own father with a bomb threat. That afternoon, Sylvie's father, Darryl, picked her up from school and scolded her for the trick she pulled. Before they left, the blonde lady knocked on the car window, asking for a ride. Darryl refuses, but Sylvia claims that she is her best friend. When Darryl agrees, he asks what her friend's name is. To cover up her lie, Sylvia looks back at the woman and claims her name is Ivy based on the tattoo pasted on her leg. She then whispers to the woman to pretend to be Ivy before they let her in. Ivy sits in the front seat, reasoning so that she gets car sick in the back. As they drive, she puts her feet up on the dashboard, exposing her thighs, which Darryl notices. A few days later, Sylvie sees Ivy at the place where she was hanging out and notices that she has lost her other shoe. Ivy says he fell when she was sitting on the swing, so she walks around in one shoe. When they leave the area, Sylvie asks Ivy's real name, but Ivy replies that she likes the new name better because it's like she's starting all over again. Ivy then notices Sylvie's sapphire necklace that Darryl gave her. However, she believes that he feels guilty only because he adopted her. Although Sylvie thinks Darryl is an annoying person, Ivy notices that he is better than her completely abusive father. The two of them walk home, and when Sylvie gets to her house, Ivy is surprised to find out that she is rich. Before Ivy leaves, Sylvie asks if she wants to sit in her room, and Ivy happily agrees. When Ivy sees the majestic view from Sylvie's balcony, she says she would have crashed to her death if she had the opportunity to commit suicide. Sylvie thinks it would be dirty, but Ivy replies that it would be faster than cutting herself, which Sylvie claims she did before. However, it turns out that Georgie, Sylvie's sickly mother, was eavesdropping on their conversation and became disillusioned with her daughter. Then she goes to her room and takes medication, which Sylvie helps her with. Georgia claims she doesn't like Ivy and is amused that Sylvia is making up lies about her background and mental health. Georgie continues to speak ill of Ivy's appearance only to discover that the visitor is listening to her, and this forces her to leave. Sylvia asks her to stay, so George compensates for her judgmental remarks and tries to get to know the visitor better. Ivy says that she goes to Sylvie's school, but feels a little out of place, because representatives of the elite study there. She adds that she lives with her aunt, who pays for her to look after her. Just at that moment, George's oxygen tank clogged up and Ivy fixed it. When a woman talks about dying young, Ivy tells her that her mother died at the age of 40. Her mother lived a lonely and meaningless life, so she doesn't want to be like her. After that, Ivy sees a photo of George in which she was younger and helps her relive the memories of her youth. A few days later, Sylvie continues to hang out together, with the latter paying for the purchases of her new friends. Pretty soon Ivy eventually moves in with her, which her aunt doesn't mind, since she still gets paid. Georgie seems to enjoy Ivy's company, but Darryl continues to stare at her angrily. One evening, Sylvie confesses to Ivy that she lied about hurting herself and admits that she is not an adopted daughter. Fortunately, this lie doesn't upset Ivy. The next day, Ivy is basking in the sun on the balcony, unaware that Darryl is staring at her from inside the house. Then he approaches her and starts a conversation with her. When Ivy is about to leave, she asks him to bring her boots, but he accidentally drops them into the pond below. To make amends for ruining them, Darryl gives her some money, but holds her hand for a while, handing her cash. Later, Ivy puts on her wet shoes and gets ready to leave. However, someone calls and asks if Sylvie is free on the 16th for her usual volunteer work. Despite the fact that the calendar says that they have a party at Darryl's that day, Ivy says that her friend is free. Meanwhile, Georgie is arguing with Darryl for hiding her pills, which he did because he was afraid she might commit suicide. Angry at her family, Georgie asks Ivy to take her to her room. Shaken by her mother's depression, Sylvie later skips classes with Ivy. After that, Ivy gets a real tattoo in the form of a stick, which she always puts on her leg. She even advises Sylvie to do the same, although her friend says she is not that type of person. This offends Ivy because it implies that she is a class below her. She rants about how Sylvie is a titled rich girl, so her friend curses her and leaves. However, before she leaves, Ivy asks for money to pay the creepy tattoo artist. Sylvia rolls her eyes and hands her the cash, but soon returns, realizing that she gave her too much. Ivy refuses to pay her back, so in the end they have to carry the bill back and forth. Soon they realize that they are behaving petty, so they hug and apologize to each other. Just at this moment, the tattoo artist joins their embrace and the ladies become disgusted. In the end, Sylvie gets a tattoo on her ankle, but she gets an infection, as she predicted. One day Sylvia expresses her self-doubt, but Ivy assures her that she is beautiful. As Ivy continues to compliment her, she admits that she loves her. Sylvia is surprised by this, but shyly replies that she loves her too. Suddenly Ivy kisses her, but Sylvia is embarrassed and cuts off their conversation in mid-sentence. Elsewhere, Darryl is still worried about his wife's depression, so in the end he punches the glass of the elevator with his fist, injuring his arm as a result. His work partner wonders what is the matter, and although he hesitates at first, he eventually admits that he is afraid of losing his wife. Meanwhile, Georgie is pacing the balcony, about to jump to her death. However, Sylvia Ivy arrives in time to stop her. After that, Sylvia tries to talk to Georgia, but she wants to be left alone. That same evening, Ivy finds Darryl having a midnight snack without a wig. When she touches his bald spot, Darryl removes his hand from her and grins. However, Ivy says she likes him like this because he looks more human. Before she leaves, she notices the bandage covering his arm and kisses it lightly. A few days later, they prepare for Darryl's party, which is his attempt to save his career after a false bomb report. However, Sylvia's colleague from the volunteer program comes for her, which confuses her. Ivy pretends to be innocent, claims that she must have mixed up the dates when she answered his call. To make amends, Ivy volunteered to help drill at the party instead of him. Ivy then smiles at Darryl, convincing him to let Sylvie go. At the party, Ivy changes into George's clothes and everyone is amazed by her beauty, especially Darryl. Meanwhile, Georgie hesitates to join this event because she is not sure about her appearance. Once under pressure, she takes a few pills to calm down. Later, Ivy gets drunk and seduces Darryl in the kitchen. However, George catches them red-handed. Darryl tries to ease his wife's anxiety and puts her to bed, although she begins to resent him and Ivy. Just at this moment Ivy appears with champagne to calm the nerves of the couple during the conversation. She then claims that Darryl went to the kitchen to cry because he was stressed about work and George's condition, so she comforted him. Ivy's manipulations mislead George and she even apologizes to her husband. Then she drinks champagne, unaware that Ivy puts something in it that puts her to sleep. When the situation clears up, Ivy seduces Darryl and in the end he pleasures her right next to his unconscious wife. When Sylvie returns home that evening, she finds her dog Fred sleeping next to Sylvie. She gets jealous because Fred hates everyone but her. The next day, Ivy treats Fred to treats that she hid in the garage when she noticed George's old car. She admires her, and when she finds the keys, she happily sits in the front seat. Meanwhile, Darryl sips some vodka as soon as he wakes up. When Sylvie asks if the party was a success, he quickly hides a bottle of alcohol in the closet behind his back, unaware that his daughter can still see it. After that, Sylvie searches for Fred and goes in search of him in the garage. However, when she spots Ivy in her mom's car, she becomes enraged. She is already jealous that Fred is friends with her, so she shouts at her to get out. She then points out that Ivy is wearing her mother's clothes again, although Ivy claims that Georgie let her borrow them from her. Sylvie then calls her dog a traitor and proves it by forcing Fred to choose between her and Ivy. Due to the fact that Ivy has a secret dog treats in her pocket, Fred approaches her, which pisses Sylvia off. Before leaving, Ivy takes off the skirt Sylvia brought her, saying it's the only thing her mother didn't borrow. Later, Darryl picks up the ladies from school, but Ivy claims that Sylvia is not around. She then declares that she wants to walk home, but Darryl insists that she get in the car. However, as they drive, Darryl remembers what he did to her the night before. He tells her to get out of the car, but Ivy hints that she will cope with everything he offers her. Succumbing to temptation, Darryl takes her into the woods, and they copulate. That night Ivy comes home soaked through from the rain and apologizes to Sylvie. The next day, Ivy sees George standing on the balcony listening to a song that Sylvie composed for her birthday. She asks the woman if she's still thinking about killing herself, and George nods. When she turns her back on her, Ivy pushes her. Georgie manages to grab her arm, but she lets her slip and fall to her death. When Sylvia enters the house looking for her mother, Ivy hides behind the door, still shaken by what she has done. Soon the family arranges George's funeral and when they return home for her ashes, Sylvia can't help but blame herself for it. She thinks that if she told her mother that she loved her, it might give her a reason to live. That night Sylvia can't sleep, so she goes to George's room. However, there she finds Ivy, who claims that she stopped there because she wants to give her friend some free space. She then invites Sylvie to join her in bed. She wants to offer her comfort, so she encourages Sylvie to pretend she's Georgie and say everything she's never said. Sylvia hesitates, but then admits that she envied George for always being the center of attention. When her mother got sick, she was happy, thinking that her turn would finally come. However, she was wrong, since everything was still left to George's discretion. Despite all this, Sylvia insists that she still loves her mother. A few days later, Darryl returns to work only to find that he has been replaced by a younger reporter. Meanwhile, Sylvia is washing her mother's car when Evie offers to scatter George's ashes. They then get into George's car and Ivy gets behind the wheel, assuring Sylvia that she knows how to do it. However, she can barely keep the car steady. On the way, Sylvie starts talking about her mother's death and Ivy starts acting tense. Then she starts humming a song, and Sylvia recognizes it as a composition she composed for George's birthday. She remembers that George performed it on the morning she died, so she turned to Key for more information, as she believes that she was there when it happened. However, Ivy only flips the card to shift the focus of attention. When Sylvie doesn't buy it, Ivy yells that she's accusing her of something she never did, something Sylvie never hinted at. As a result of their argument, they almost collided with another car. Ivy avoids the collision, but in the end, they crash into a tree. Soon after, Ivy wakes up next to Sylvie, whose head is bleeding due to an accident. Then she drags her into the driver's seat and smears blood on the steering wheel to make it look like she was driving. After that, she leaves. Soon Darryl goes to the hospital to visit his daughter. Already upset about his own problems, he attacks her, thinking that Sylvie is behaving rebelliously and trying to blame Ivy for everything. Sylvie realizes that her father has been the victim of Ivy's manipulation, so later that night she sneaks out of the hospital and returns home. However, when she gets there, she finds her father and Ivy together. When they finally realize she's watching them, Sylvie runs away. Darryl follows her in the rain, but slips and injures his back. After that, Ivy approaches him and declares that she will go after Sylvie. However, Darryl notices a bruise on her chest, shaped like a car steering wheel. He realizes that she was driving when they crashed, so he forces Ivy to tell the truth. She lies that Sylvia forced her to do this and that she only pretended that his daughter caused the accident to help them with insurance. Still not convinced of this, Darryl goes in search of his daughter, ordering Ivy to stay put. Later, Ivy changes into George's robe and goes out onto the balcony. Sylvia unknowingly sees her from below and thinks it's her mother. That's why she goes upstairs to talk to her and tells her that she loves her. However, when Ivy starts kissing her, Sylvie snaps back to reality. Then she glares at Ivy, coming to the conclusion that she killed George. Ivy talks as if she wanted to die, insisting that it doesn't matter because they can finally become a family. This drives Sylvia crazy, so she pushes Ivy off the balcony. The woman manages to grab hold of her necklace, but it breaks, causing her to fall to her death. When she crashes into concrete, Darryl witnesses this tragedy. Eventually Sylvia talks to herself and says she misses her, although it's unclear who she's talking about, George or Eva.